Hello and welcome to CATEX TV. I'm Tom Bailey in London. It's 4:30 PM in London, 11:30 Eastern Time, 12:30 in Bermuda. Now to the news. Tropical storm activity. Tropical storm Beatrice has now been downgraded to a tropical depression. As you'll see from the chart, she is now on the other side of Mexico in the eastern Pacific. The projected course is to continue northwesterly into the Pacific, and current wind strengths are 25 knots, and the forecast over the next 24 hours is for the storm, what is now tropical depression, to dissipate. In the western Pacific, we are looking at two storm systems. The first is Tropical Depression Heimer. Tropical Depression Heimer's got a sustained wind of 25 knots, forecast over the next 24 hours to weaken to 20 knots but remain a tropical depression. As you'll see, the projected course for Heimer is to head towards in the direction of Hong Kong and sort of mainland China. Again, we'll keep you posted on any developments there. And finally, Tropical Storm 7 is currently sort of lying to the east of the Philippines, on course to hit Taipei, and then carrying up to Shanghai. The sustained winds for 7, which is already a tropical storm, are 35 knots, and those are forecast to strengthen over the next 24 hours to 55 knots. So again, we'll keep you appraised of any movement there. Now, more than 5 million people have been believed to have been affected by severe flooding in eastern China, amid further predictions of heavy rain in the coming days. That rain will not be helped by these storm systems that are heading in that direction. The Chinese government has raised its disaster alert to the highest level, as the flooding has caused more than $700 million worth of damage so far. Chen Li, Minister of Water Resources, said on Monday severe floods triggered by heavy rains will continue to threaten parts of southern China. There is increasing possibility that downpours with enhanced frequency and intensity will continue to lash the regions in the south. Heavy rains hit the Xinjiang province over the weekend, and the level of a river that passes through Langxi city has risen sharply. Now, the airline industry very badly hit by ash cloud disruption last year. An ash cloud from a volcano in Chile is again disrupting Australian air travel, with Qantas Airways and Virgin Australia cancelling domestic flights in and out of Sydney and other key cities, disrupting travel plans of more than 120,000 passengers. The ash cloud, which is circling the Earth for the second time, is expected to reach South Australia today, after drifting 9,656 kilometers across the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. International flights were mostly operating, but some flights were being diverted, delayed or cancelled. Australian flag carrier Qantas said yesterday that the decision followed the airline to cancel services to Sydney, Canberra and Adelaide, stranding tens of thousands of passengers. Clearly a potential impact there to travel insurance operators. Now, the aviation insurance sector, which has had better than average loss pattern, has taken a hit after the RusAir operated Tupolev 134A crashed just before it was due to land. We reported on that yesterday. At the start of the month, the overall loss total in the airline industry market stood at $358 million, according to Aon. This is compared with $687 million at the same point last year, with the $358 million also representing some 60% of the average. So that's the average between 1996 and 2010. However, as Aon noted in the last edition of its airline insurance market news, a single incident could change the position radically. This is particularly true given the risk profile of the airline industry is evolving, with fewer, more major losses occurring than were the norm as recently as 5 years ago. While it's often the case aircraft are insured locally, the RusAir states its own insurance coverage is placed outside its domestic market. Indeed, some of it is placed in Lloyd's, so we'll expect to see some of that ripple through. Now, Japanese non-life insurers lost record amounts of money in the financial year to 31st of March 2011, according to numbers released by the General Insurance Association of Japan. The GI said 25 domestic non-life companies lost 183.2 billion yen, which is about $2.28 billion in losses in their core operations as they booked large amounts of provision against payouts likely as a result of the March 11 earthquake and subsequent tsunami. Net premiums were flat at 6.97 trillion yen, while net claims declined 1.1% to 4.31 trillion yen. Catastrophe modeler EquiCat released a defense of its loss estimate of $3 billion to $5 billion for Monday's Christchurch earthquake, saying its model suggested that would be the incremental damage to the city over and above February's quake. 3 senior reinsurance industry underwriting sources told Reuters this week they had serious doubts about EquiCat's estimate and how the company had come to it. They all estimated the actual loss at $1 billion or less. The quake was the third major one to hit New Zealand in 9 months. Over that time, EquiCat has pegged the total insured losses at up to $23 billion. Government officials said this week that parts of Christchurch would have to be abandoned after the latest tremor. EquiCat said on Friday it arrived at the latest figures by answering 3 questions: the difference between Monday's quake in isolation and the impact if it had occurred at the same time as February's tremor, the effects of shaking on partly rebuilt buildings, the sort of disaster responses the quake generated that would increase insurance payouts. Had the 2 quakes occurred roughly together, EquiCat said the damage would have been about 10% greater than that was actually caused by the February event. The difference translates to about $1.5 billion in damages. Now, sort of a follow-on to that. The modelling efforts in the aftermath of the latest New Zealand earthquake have been complicated by damage caused by earlier tremors, according to Managing Director at AIR, Milan Simic. Simic, who was in New Zealand at the time of the June 13th quake, said AIR had not released a loss estimate for the latest quake, and while he said that there will be some attritional damage, he said this would not be on a scale of the 2 previous events to have caused major damage to the country. So clearly there's a lack of consensus from the modelling agencies on this one, as is often the case. Caribbean-based Sagicor Financial Corporation has committed itself to the London market at its annual general meeting, despite the Lloyd's operation substantially denting the group's full-year profits in 2010. A £13.1 million loss, which is about $21.2 million for Sagicor at Lloyd's, stemming from UK motor and catastrophe claims, was blamed for a drop in full-year profits. The Sagicor chairman Stephen McNamara described as disappointing. Earlier this year, McNamara explained the group was taking corrective actions to limit the syndicate exposure to global catastrophes, and the effect of these should be evident by the second half of the year. And at the group AGM, its shareholders affirmed their support for Sagicor International strategy, including Sagicor at Lloyd's and Sagicor USA. And finally today, Alterra Capital Holdings, the Bermuda-based reinsurer, expects to lose $18 million to $28 million before taxes because of costs tied to tornadoes and other severe US storms in April and May. The prediction, which also cited recent flooding along the Mississippi River, assumes total insured losses from the storms of $11 billion to $18 billion, according to Alterra. Well, that's all from us today. We'll be back with you at the same time tomorrow. Until then, thank you very much and goodbye.